Let's get to the New Orleans Saints. Before we do, though, be sure to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Check the mic. Hit the thumbs up and the bell. Make sure you get alerted every time we go live here. Appreciate all of our viewers, listeners, and subscribers here. New Orleans Saints. What a time for the Saints. Kellen Moore coming in as the new head coach. Brandon Staley as defensive coordinator. And for the first time in a long time, well, one thing's familiar, one thing's unfamiliar. Here's the familiar part. As we head into the new league year, the Saints are last in cap space, and it's red, right? It's negative. They're a negative, a lot of negative cap space. But for the first time in a while, you're starting to see GM Mickey Loomis with an eye toward the future, right? It made sense for a while when Drew Brees was your quarterback. You kept pushing the credit card, maxing that thing out and saying the bill will come due sometime close to 2030. But here we are, and I think it's a reset year for the New Orleans Saints. Also, for the first time, the last time they drafted more than 7 times in a draft, more than the allotted 7, was 2015. And several of those drafts were 4 players, 5 players, a lot of just 7 players. For the first time, they actually have more than 7 draft picks in about 10 years. So it's a different time, I think, for the Saints, and a good time for them not to completely think about 2026. Maybe there's a little competitive rebuild here, but man, I hope most of their decisions are toward the future and not just trying to put a team together for 2025.
Yeah, I mean, it's the time to reset. Like, you can kind of trace all of the cap woes kind of back to the last few years of Drew Brees and the realization or awareness within the building that, like, let's try and get Drew one more. This is our guy. This is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. Let's try and get one more championship while we have this guy, and then we'll deal with the future in the future. And they did that. They didn't get it done, but it was a fair enough approach, I think, to those things. But eventually you suffer the consequences of some of that. They tried to sort of they tried to just go as far as they could with Derek Carr as a quarterback. It's like, that's good enough to maybe win you a division. Actually, it turns out it wasn't, because it took them too long to get going. And then last year you dealt with a ton of injuries as well. It just wasn't going to work out. So now you're basically full reset. You've gone a different direction. You're bringing in a new head coach. Brandon Staley, I think, is actually a really intriguing retread as a defensive coordinator. I mean, the last time we saw him just focusing on one side of the ball, he was running the number 1 defense in the game, albeit with Aaron Donald, but running a scheme that's still at the cutting edge. I mean, Vic Fangio's defense is the same shell, effectively the same family tree. That just wrecked the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I mean, that was running the number 1 defense in the league this year. So I think it's entirely plausible that Staley could get that group cooking if they get him some personnel. But now you've got this is a team that could really use having a good draft now.
Yes. I mean, that's it. I mean, they need to draft better. They did have this stretch. I think if you looked at their drafts from 2010 through 20 or 21 or whatever, they may have been the best drafting team in the NFL as far as just hit rates and finding the best players. That's kind of tapered off a little bit these last couple of years. And then it coincides with not drafting often, right? Having those drafts where there's only 4 players coming in or 5 players coming in. So we talk a lot about rebuilding years and everything. I think you can do the competitive rebuild deal here, because when they brought Derek Carr in, I was fine with that. You're talking about a weak NFC South. And so, Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins coming in as a starting quarterback in the NFC South feels better than adding them to, say, the AFC North, right? When you have to compete with the Ravens, the Bengals, and teams that have, clear superior talent at quarterback. So I think the Saints, if Carr was playing pretty well last year and, he can go on those runs and those stretches, they might stay competitive. I just want the rest of those decisions to be, let's build through the draft. Let's not make, crazy decisions in free agency, and let's build to the future. I think you can almost do both. And the Saints might actually, again, if they keep Carr and don't move on from him, set up in this competitive rebuild world. I would set that part up with drafting another quarterback, right? So they drafted Spencer Rattler last year. Love it, right? Take shots on Spencer Rattler. Got him in the 5th, way later than people expected. Draft another one of these, the 3rd, 4th, 5th QB off the board, whoever it is. Draft another one to hopefully stumble in to the heir apparent while you still have Derek Carr on the roster?
Yeah, well, that would be my question first and foremost. If we are fixing the Saints, is there any purpose to keeping Derek Carr other than he does make you a lot more competitive than Spencer Rattler does as your quarterback? To me, Derek Carr is emblematic of the cap trouble that we need to fix on the roster. Like if we're doing this properly and rebuilding, we need to clear that contract off the books. And to be honest, they can clear a ton of space if they cut him with a post June 1st designation. It's a lot more painful if they cut him and I don't even know if they can do that because of how far over the cap they are. But if we're fixing this, and we're getting rid of that contract.
Most of the cap savings would be next year, but there's a lot of dead money attached to Derek Carr. That's why I'm saying I'd almost rather just keep him. And kind of like remember when Bryce Young got benched and you said, hey, I can't even evaluate the rest of the Panthers roster because the QB play is so bad. Like, Derek Carr helps you evaluate the rest of your roster, but just let him be the guy that's under center while you're, bringing in all the youth movement.
He does, but he also chews up $51 million of your cap this year if you keep him around.
No, I get it. I understand. I'm not in tank mode though for the Saints. I don't know if that's the best way to go, because that would be suggesting, it's getting out of, cap hell, but are you going to roll with Rattler as the starter, or are you just going to draft someone else? Or are you going to go Daniel Jones? I mean, are you going to go bridge quarterback somewhere? Justin Fields is going to come in at $5 million.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm getting rid of Derek Carr, I'm definitely looking around for a bridge or something to compete with Spencer Rattler, because I wouldn't want to, I don't think you can go into the season saying Spencer Rattler's our guy based off what we saw from him last season. Which is unfortunate for him, because Sam Howell kind of ruined that as a possibility for low round drafted quarterbacks for a long time. I think those guys do not get more than a look. If you get a chance in the NFL, you either are a Dak Prescott, where basically immediately the second you get in the building, the second you get in the building, everyone's like, oh, this guy's actually, we missed. He's just way better than everyone thought he was. So you're either that guy, or you get a look because the situation's not good. A guy gets hurt and you end up getting a few games to start. If you don't look good in those few games, unquestionably good, there's no way they're gonna gamble that you're gonna be better next year. And the Washington did with Sam Howell. They're like, this guy looked pretty good. Let's give him a shot for a year. And it wasn't good. So that's never happening again for a long period of time. I think, Spencer Rattler for a year would be interesting to watch, but I don't think there's any shot of that happening. So if you're not doing that, you got to go find a bridge, whether it's, Daniel Jones is not a bad shout, but something like that, and then draft the guy too. And now your QB room is Spencer Rattler, Daniel Jones / alternative bridge quarterback, and a rookie of some description.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't think we're winning a Super Bowl with Derek Carr or Daniel Jones. You made a face.
I mean, it's just a bold call.
Most important for me is maximizing all these draft picks. So that's where my focus is going to be. I'm going to spend at least one on a QB. You got pick 9, another team that could use help in the trenches. I mean, right tackle, they drafted Talise Fawanga in the first round last year, moved him to left tackle. Right tackle is Trevor Penning. So you can draft another tackle if you need to. Tackle the guard. You've been playing this game where if Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks is there, they could be a guard first, maybe a tackle. They could be both. They're probably in the market for that, and they're in the market for all of those freak edge rushers that are going to be available in the first round.
As a quarterback option, by the way, you do also have the player that Skip Bayless believes is better than Dak Prescott available this free agent period.
Cooper Rush can win the NFC South. What's his career record? He's got a better career record than Derek Carr. Win-loss record, I bet.
I mean, the data speaks for itself.
Somebody fact check me on that. Harry, can you fact check me on Cooper Rush's record? All right. What else do we want to do draft-wise? I mean, it's just draft the best players available, man. They've got the corner need as well. I think there's corners to be had maybe in the second round with Paulson Adebo coming off the bad injury and heading to free agency. Defensive line starters and depth needed, in part because they've missed, man. They've missed on Brian. Look, I know Brian Brzee has a lot of sacks. He still struggles against the run, doesn't create consistent pressure like some others. Maybe he'll get better, but Brzee, Isaiah Foskey, some of those other high round draft picks, like they got to go back to that well on the defensive line.
That defensive line, I think, needs a real significant amount of work to it. You've got, Carl Granderson is a good player. Cameron Jordan is still going, but has declined hugely from the point where he was a real impact defensive lineman. So, you've got, at this point, Granderson's the only player out there that's consistently moving the needle in a positive direction. Brzee makes some plays, but he also makes a ton of plays on the negative side. Cameron Jordan just isn't the player that he used to be. All the other guys, Colin Saunders has made some plays, including that interception. But again, it's not like an impact defensive lineman. Chase Young, who did some solid work last year, but is a free agent. Peyton Turner never worked out. Isaiah Foskey hasn't done it yet. There's Nathan Shepard was a letdown throughout his career. This is not a good group. And they really, I can throw bodies at it both in free agency and the draft if they can find them.
Yeah. So that's definitely one of my first orders of business here is reshaping the defensive line. Then you got to look at receiver, right? Chris Olave, he's dealt with all those concussions, but he's the best option, obviously. And Rashid Shaheed is, the best wide receiver in the NFL when he's healthy. We all know that. But yeah, they could use another dependable pass catcher there as well. So I think that second, third tier of wide receivers, there's probably pluck one of those guys, at least in this draft.
Yeah, I think their first round pick almost has to go on the defensive line. The Olave thing makes that a very difficult sort of position group to evaluate for them because he's dealt with multiple concussions now that have kept him out for a significant period of time. Is that something that when we were at the Super Bowl, we went on this sort of medical tour of the building with Dr. Alan Sills, the NFL's kind of chief medical guy. They were talking about the procedures and the concussion stuff and what the whole setup was at the Super Bowl. One of the things I think that's difficult to figure out is is an NFL offseason enough to kind of fully reset players that have had issues with concussions? Because a difference between the NFL and a lot of other sports is the downtime in football is a lot longer. A guy like you talked about Jaquan Brisker for the Bears or Chris Olave, or obviously Tua was the biggest example of quarterback, but these guys, you can deal with multiple concussions within a season that can suddenly start to go, this is keeping him out for a lot longer than we expected. But in a sport like rugby, you're constantly going. The season is most of the year. And you have to manufacture a break. You have to say, no, we're shutting you down for the rest of the season. Whereas in the NFL, once you reach the offseason, particularly if you didn't make the playoffs, you get to January and now you don't need to be going again until August, right? That's 6-7 months of downtime where you don't have to, expose your brain to those kind of hits. Is that enough to reset a guy like Olave and say, okay, concussions are in the past now. We just had a rough season of this. Or is this going to be a lingering problem for him? And now he falls under the category of guys that you love when he's on the field, but you can't rely on because he's got an extensive concussion history.
I'm thinking it's probably a concern. It's a concern. I'd love to pair someone with him, but I think you have to think about depth even more because of that at receiver. So I think drafting a couple of receivers makes a lot of sense here for the Saints. So defensive line, couple receivers, offensive line, they need it all. 9 draft picks, first time since 2015 with more than 7. So different. It should hopefully be. Hopefully they're not trading up like they used to. Change your ways, Saints. Right. If I'm running the show here, I might turn 9 into 12. You know me. We'll turn it into 12 picks, and it's going to be one of the youngest rosters in the NFL next year, completely changing this whole thing. So that's how we're doing it.
I like it.
Did we solve them? We gave them some options.
Well, they're tough because they don't have money to spend in free agency. They're not. You can't go around and go, well, let's add these 3 players to
cut the credit card. You cut up the credit card. You can't even do it. Oh, but Amari Cooper's out there. Stephon Diggs is still. No, you can't even. No, the card's cut. Can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not as bleak as it looks right now. They'll always be able to restructure, clear some space. You know, they'll get under the cap, obviously, and they'll probably have enough room to get a couple of low-level, mid-level players come in free agency. So it's not like I don't imagine a world where they're not going to do anything. They're just going to sit in their hands in free agency and not even dabble. I'm sure they'll bring in a couple of players, but it's tough because you're dealing with like low-level contracts, I think, with the amount they're going to be spending. And it really should be the focus on the draft, and let's maximize, the largest number of picks we've had in a while.
All right, man. I think we solved the Saints here. Giving them some options.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.